Hurricane Sandy had a significant impact on our area, and the City of New York is committed to helping New Yorkers move forward with rebuilding. We are here to provide the best available information regarding your current risk of coastal flooding and to help you build back stronger and safer than ever before. In this video, we will focus on residential buildings. FEMA has released new advisory-based flood elevation maps. They can serve as a guide to rebuilding after an event like Hurricane Sandy. The FEMA maps will tell you whether your property is in a flood hazard area, and if so, how high the first floor of the building should be to protect it from a severe coastal flood.
These maps reflect the best available data that will determine your risk against coastal flooding. And it's very important for you to have this information.
As we saw with Sandy, some areas once considered outside of the flood zone are now within the new advisory flood zones, and areas once considered low risk are now considered high risk. To access the FEMA flood maps, go to www.region2coastal.com and click on What is my ABFE? It is important for New Yorkers to protect themselves against the risk of coastal flooding. If you live in a flood zone, you should have flood insurance. If you have a federally backed mortgage, you are required to maintain it. New York City's building code contains floodproofing requirements.
90% of all the buildings severely damaged or destroyed by Sandy were actually built prior to flood zone regulations.
The Department of Buildings advises you to apply the building code standards to levels recommended by the new FEMA advisory-based flood elevation maps. For example, if you are rebuilding in an A zone, the lowest floor must be elevated. If that residence is in V zone, it must be elevated on stilts without any enclosed space below, such as a basement.
So you may be asking yourself, what's my next step? We recommend that you reach out to a professional, such as an architect or an engineer, who will engage a surveyor and determine how this specifically applies to you and your building. The mayor recently signed an emergency rule to make buildings even more flood resistant. The emergency rule raises the minimum elevation to which a building must be designed by 1 or 2 feet above the elevation previously required by the building code. To enable you to comply with the new FEMA recommendations, the city is suspending certain zoning provisions. For example, a 1 or 2 family home can now be rebuilt as it existed before the storm, as long as its lowest floor is raised above the advisory-based flood elevation. All of these changes will allow thousands of New Yorkers to rebuild their homes as they existed prior to Hurricane Sandy, and they will be much more flood resistant.
By building to heights recommended by FEMA, you will lower your flood insurance premiums. To access the Department of Buildings Guide to Flood Zone Construction, go to www.nyc.gov and search for buildings. As New Yorkers rebuild, we will continue to provide the best information as it becomes available.